assessment today. But first off, are there any housekeeping details that anyone needs us to attend to? Everyone's happy, well fed, doing great? Okay. Then today we'll be talking about best practices in assessment and also maybe some alternative ways of doing assessment, bouncing those off up against those 5 areas of importance when it comes to mobile devices. So Jen Black, Will Collar, and myself will be presenting this session and also the Jen to start.
Good morning, everybody. It's like not everybody's filtered in yet. All right, so the first question, I guess, when we're talking about assessment is what do we mean when we say assessment? And so I'd like to hear from you, what do you mean when you talk about assessment in your classes or in general? This is the part where you talk. Yeah.
The process by which you know what your students have learned.
Okay, so a way of measuring student learning.
Yeah.
Okay, other thoughts? What else? I mean, and you can get into, I mean, when I was thinking about this and preparing for this part of the presentation, I was just thinking about the way that, depending on our role, the idea of assessment means something different. So it always has to do with measuring student learning, I think, but it can take on different aspects depending on our role, depending on at what point we're doing it. So what other things do you mean when you talk about assessment?
Determining whether we met our goals or not.
Okay, we meaning teachers. So yeah, part of assessment is
whoever.
Yeah, is measuring whether the students met, whether they've learned something, and did we meet our goals as teachers in preparing them to learn those things or helping them to achieve those outcomes. So we're assessing student learning, but we're also assessing instructor facilitation of student learning. Other things that assessment means to you?
Grading.
Yeah. All right. That's the fun part. So there's that idea of summative assessment, right? That preserves some kind of a record, right? I just had to send off my grade sheets to our administrative assistant yesterday because she needs a record. She wants something that if someone comes back and says, well, why did I get this grade? She can say, well, look, here's the record of these assessments that leads to this summative grade that you received. So yeah, on the one hand, I mean, that's another way of looking at assessment is not just did they achieve these learning goals, but how do I measure them in terms of grades, which I've often thought, oh, it'd be so nice if we didn't have to do grades, but it's a good motivation for students, and a good motivation for me to assess them. Other ideas, other thoughts about what assessment means? And does assessment mean something different on a programmatic level than it does on a classroom level? Yes, okay. How so?
Well, at a classroom level, you're assessing the student's knowledge and understanding and your own goals for the course. But at a programmatic level, you're assessing the goals for your department or for your program.
Right. Yeah, so there's these different...
The university.
Right. Yeah, so serving the same function on a different level. And so that's one way of looking at assessment is on these different levels, that there are assessments that might happen on a daily basis. You know, these sort of formative assessments to say, okay, well, did they learn the concept that I taught right now? Take out a piece of paper, everybody. No, you get it. Hypothetical, right? Take out a piece of paper and tell me your understanding of this concept right now. And then I can collect these and see, okay, I mean, clickers work great for this too. Do you understand what this means? Yes, you know, and then you say, oh, okay, actually we need to spend more time on that than I thought. So there's kind of formative assessments that are affecting your teaching. And then the summative assessments that tend to be toward the end of the semester. There are module level or unit level assessments or daily assessments. There are larger assessments that happen on, you know, kind of milestones in the courses, and then end of semester assessments, program level assessments, college level assessments. So at every point we are measuring the effectiveness of our teaching and the effectiveness of students' learning capabilities. And so in this session, I think we are focusing mostly on class level assessment, although these things carry over as you're participating in program level assessment. And then we'll talk about both those kinds of, well, three kinds of assessment: formative, summative, and programmatic assessment, and ways that you can incorporate mobile devices into those. And again, I would invite you to let yourself be shaken up as much as possible by some of these ideas. And instead of just searching for the ones that you say, oh yeah, I've done that, say, oh, I've never thought about doing, I wonder how that would function in my class. And so hopefully you'll leave with at least some ideas about how to do that. Okay, so.
So I've been told to be brief. We've been talking, not too brief, well, as they leave the room. We take as much time as we want. So we've been talking a lot about learning objectives. I've heard a little bit of buzz about what's all this emphasis on learning objectives, how come we're focused on learning objectives. We got a new term today, guys, gals. What is constructive alignment? And so my overview is just to kind of give you that perspective of where we're going to go today. Constructive alignment is a principle of curriculum and course design that focuses on using learning objectives, we've been talking about, to shape both your learning activities and the way that you assess the student learners. The term itself was coined in 1996 by John Biggs, who was a psychologist and educational theorist. And since then, his philosophy has become the underlying concept for transformation of higher education. There are two basic concepts behind constructive alignment. One deals with the learner, and the other deals with us as the instructor. Number one, learners construct meaning from what they do to learn. This concept highlights the importance of linking new learning to concepts and experiences in the learner's memory and helping them to extrapolate possible future scenarios through that reflection. And for the instructor, the teacher makes a deliberate alignment between the learning objectives and both the learning activities, and remember the wheels we had up there the other day, the learning activities and the learning assessments. This effort provides the learner with a clearly specified goal, a well-designed learning activity that is appropriate to meet the objective, and a well-designed assessment that demonstrates to the learner and to the teacher the extent to which the objective has been accomplished or achieved. Constructive alignment is more difficult to achieve than you might think. It is difficult to get right the first time you attempt it, and the learning activity and assessments can be challenging. So we must commit ourselves as instructors to this being an ongoing process as we go through and we look at how these assessments are being applied, how the students are performing. We may do a mid-course adjustment ourselves. Some of our own learning objectives that we thought we had written all that we were going to have, we're going to all of a sudden discover that the students came up with yet another aha for us for a learning objective that we need to incorporate into the course. John Biggs had a quote that I thought was worth sharing. In constructive alignment, we start with the outcomes we intend students to learn and align teaching and assessment to those outcomes. The outcome statements contain a learning activity, a verb, that students need to perform to best achieve the outcome, such as applying expectancy value theory of motivation, or explain the concept of. The verb says what the relevant learning activities are that the students need to undertake in order to attain the intended learning outcome. Learning is constructed by what the activities the students carry out. Learning is about what they do, not about what we are teaching them to do. Likewise, assessment is about how well they achieve the intended outcomes, not about how well they report back to us what we have told them. So many of you are familiar, actually I don't know, how many of you are familiar with the Quality Matters rubric and the process that we equip? Okay, just a few of you. I thought it would be worth sharing a couple of the Quality Matters standards that we focus on as we teach in that course the assessment module. And so there are a number of rigorous standards and they cover different areas. So we've highlighted the ones that are dealing with assessment. And they are as follows. The course learning objectives describe outcomes that are measurable. The unit objectives describe outcomes that are measurable and consistent with the course level objectives. The types of assessments selected measure the stated learning objectives that are consistent with course activities and resources. And the instructional materials contribute to the achievement of the stated course and module or unit learning objectives. The learning activities promote the achievement of the stated learning objectives. So you get the idea there's a correlation there between these. There are some good principles of assessment, and the information that we want to share with you today comes from the American Association for Higher Education Assessment Forum. And these principles are considered by this group and organization to be best practices. Number one, the assessment of student learning begins with educational values. Here they describe assessment as not an end by itself, but a vehicle for educational improvement. Its effective practice begins with and enacts a vision of the kinds of learning that we most value for students and strive to help them achieve. Number two, assessment is most effective when it reflects an understanding of learning as multidimensional, integrated, and revealed in performance over time. Learning is a complex process. It entails not only what students know, but what they can do with what they know. You hear the repeating theme. It involves not only the knowledge and abilities, but the values, attitudes, and habits of mind that affect both academic success and performance beyond the classroom. Number three, assessment works best when the program it seeks to improve have clear, explicitly stated purposes. Assessment is a goal-oriented process. It entails comparing educational performance with educational purposes and expectations, those derived from faculty intentions in the program and of course design, and also from knowledge of the student's own goals in that course. Clear, shared, implementable goals are the cornerstone of assessment that is focused and useful. Number four in their focus form is assessment requires attention to outcomes, but also and equally to the experiences that lead to those outcomes. Information and outcomes is of high importance where students end up matters greatly, but to improve outcomes, we need to know the student experience along the way, what their curriculum, teaching, and kind of student effort that lead to those particular outcomes. Assessment can help us understand which students learn best under what conditions. And with such knowledge comes the capacity for us to improve the whole of the teaching process. Number five, assessment works best when it is ongoing, not episodic. Assessment is a process and whose power is cumulative. Though isolated one-shot assessments can be better than none, improvement is best fostered when assessment entails a linked series of activities undertaken over time. This may mean tracking the process of individual students or cohorts of students. It may mean collecting the same examples of student performance or using the same instrument semester after semester. The point is to monitor progress toward intended goals in a spirit of continuous improvement. Along the way, the assessment process itself should be evaluated and refined in light of emerging insights.
Okay, so with all that hopefully moving around in your heads a little bit, let's start with what you do now. So come to my Socrative classroom. It's 47290, and there's a quick poll to find out what you're doing and what you're struggling with. So I think I'm on the name question. So 47290. Okay, so first question, real question is, what assessments do you regularly use in your classes now?
How specific do you want us to say?
I would say pretty specific, like multiple choice quizzes or Seeing some patterns. Okay, I know that some of you are still sending in your answers. Patterns that you see. I mean, I see some. Yeah, some multiple choice quizzes. And I have to tell you that when I first started teaching, I thought that was anathema to me. I just, multiple choice quizzes. But I've actually become converted to their use as a formative tool, especially for students and for me to see what they know, what they don't know, how they're understanding, and especially low-stakes quizzes that students can take over and over, multiple times. But I make them always different each time. So that way I get to help them learn as they're taking those quizzes. And I've had many students thank me, especially in a class that involves a lot of writing. They said, I really appreciate having the quizzes where things are a little more concrete for me so I can see what I'm understanding and not understanding. So it's interesting because some people, they never multiple choice quizzes. But I think with almost any assessment, it can be used effectively in the right circumstances for the right purposes, as long as we're being thoughtful about the way that we're using them and what we want to get out of them. Other patterns that you see, things coming up a lot. Yeah, quite a bit of reflection, which I'm happy to see. That idea that you're assessing the students' learning, that they are also assessing their own learning. And I was telling, maybe I mentioned this already, I was talking to one of the tables about learning objectives on Monday, and we were asking this question, are my students even aware that there are learning objectives in my course? And this, after that first day with the syllabus. And one assessment strategy that's been really helpful for me is at the end of the course, asking students, okay, now you tell me, persuade me that you've achieved these learning objectives. I want you to write a reflective paper that goes through the learning objectives and gives me evidence that you have mastered those objectives. And it's been very revelatory to me, not just about their learning, but also about some learning objectives. They say, I have no idea what this is. I have no idea how I can show you that I learned this. And so, okay, well maybe that's a place for me to modify those a little bit. So yeah, those reflective activities can be really helpful, especially on a low-stakes basis throughout the course. The journal feature on Blackboard, I think I talked about that already, that can be really helpful for that. Other things that you notice, or maybe things that other people are doing that you don't do. And I guess some of these are subject-based. One of the things that I think is interesting is that how many of you list discussion as a form of assessment. And I think that that's interesting for a bunch of reasons. First of all, because I imagine that many of you also think of that as a learning activity. That many of these things are going to overlap. And I wonder too, what effect that has when students see discussion as assessment rather than as a learning activity. And does that become problematic at all? I guess it does in my classes, yeah.
I guess I'm a guidance source, but classroom discussion, I usually put in my syllabus that should be part of the grade, so this is usually by partway through the semester, I come to recognize the hyperactive overachievers, and they usually get some benefit for participation. So it's both learning and assessment.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I think it's an interesting idea, because certainly it's a way of students externalizing what they know. I just watched a really interesting TED Talk a couple of weeks ago about the power of introverts, in which the speaker said, you teachers stop grading us on, and this is an adult, a psychologist said, that was the most stressful thing for me going through college was that I was being graded on speaking, and I hate speaking in general. And so it made me think about, there are ways of And so I'm just trying to problematize this for you a little bit. I do too. I totally use discussion as an assessment tool, but I've started to wonder in what ways I can take advantage of digital environments to help level the playing field for students who are not comfortable raising their hand, pick me, but have valuable things to say. Yeah.
So one of the things that I do, I never have you participate in this discussion gets you to this grade, on a one-to-one level, but I count towards their participation grade, not necessarily whether they volunteer to speak in front of the whole class, but how active they are in their small groups. So I'm certainly active in small groups. So my experience has been that, in fact, that 99% of students are comfortable speaking in a group of 4 or 5 students if they're not comfortable speaking in front of 50.
Right.
So I count that as part of their participation.
Yeah, so breaking up that discussion so that students with different strengths have a chance to contribute to that. Yeah, Jackie.
I mean, I think the problematizing part of it for me comes with the fact that when students are discussing things in my class, I want them to always be willing to take chances. And so this goes beyond the sort of introvert-extrovert thing to say, I want all students to say things that, they're sort of maybe hearing in their head as stupid or relevant, all those sort of adjectives, that students sometimes use. And so I mean, if students are thinking that I'm assessing their comments, then, I mean, probably the underlying thing is they know that I am. But if it's explicit to them, then I would worry that they wouldn't be willing to say the things that they sometimes say because they think, oh, I'm way out, in left field or something.
Right, so that's an excellent point. And I think it goes back to, this question about whether students understand what we are assessing them on in classroom discussion, what we are looking for. If we're using that as an assessment tool, are we looking for them to have the right answers? Are we encouraging them to take those kinds of risks? The example I was thinking of, my husband was a business major, and so I guess you can do this in the School of Business, but he had a teacher who was an entrepreneur, and just randomly, when someone in class would make a good comment, he would pull a $20 bill out of his pocket and hand it to them and say, that was a $20 comment. And I'll tell you, students in those classes took risks continually because they thought, maybe this is, so I've never been able to do that. But I have thought about handing out extra credit points like that and saying, oh, thank you for trying that idea on. But again, I think are there ways of encouraging students to let them know, yes, we're assessing whether you're understanding the material. We're also trying to assess your ability to voice your own ideas and not just repeat back to me the ideas that I've shared with you. So I think, again, discussion, we almost always use it, and I don't know how thoughtful we always are about how letting students know what we're looking for in that discussion.
I guess what I'm hearing is this is more of a classroom environment idea versus an assessment issue. Because classroom context in which kids feel safe to take risks, and where it isn't about the right, but about the process or the steps towards becoming more right, creating those safe places are valuable. And I use discussion as a formative tool. I mean, that's what it is. It's not like, oh, check, you got a grade, but yeah, holy cow, 8 of you out of 25 don't get this. Something's wrong. You can go back and do it or revisit. So I guess what I'm hearing is how do you create these classroom spaces virtually, digitally, or in person?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I think part of it has to do with, again, letting students know exactly how you're grading them on this sort of participation. I stole something from someone's syllabus that I found online once, which was really helpful, that kind of set forth, for a discussion, these are the things that I would be grading you on. So, as for a C discussion, that means that you come to class and you sit there and you look at me. And you maybe can write stuff. A B discussion means that once in a while you make comments. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it was helpful for me to say, okay, well, what do I mean? How do I grade this? Or do I say, oh, I don't remember the member saying anything. Not that I would do that, but, do we have means in place that we're helping to, if we are using this as assessment? And that's where it gets sticky, because I think students know, I'm getting graded on this. It's factored into my grade somehow. Okay, so a lot of interesting things here. Some assessments that are on the students' shoulders in terms of self-evaluation. Some throughout the semester sorts of assessments. Some at the end of the semester sorts of assessments. Okay, so the next question.
Jennifer, can I ask a question
Yes, please.
before we go on? Does anybody have an element of peer assessment in their discussion where their small groups have to evaluate the individual's contribution? So I'm not the only one. Cool. Okay.
Yeah, and I know that one of the workshops this morning is going to be talking specifically about peer assessment as a tool. Okay, so the next question, hopefully we're already heading that direction, are what are the challenges that you face when you approach assessment? What gets sticky about it? That's interesting. I love reading these. Oh, that's so true. I have a sister who's a professor at another university, and she sent me at finals week a little graph about the stages of grief that a professor goes through at the end of the semester. You know, the anger, I can't believe my students didn't learn anything, the grief that I have to, deal with all these papers, I'm never going to get through it. And it's very therapeutic for me to look through that track. But I think that's reflected a little bit in here, this idea that it's difficult to externalize our expectations. I know I've had the experience of creating a rubric for an assignment and then having students do exactly what I asked them and still not create the product that I was hoping for. My rubric is broken, but they've done what I asked, but I didn't do a good enough job of figuring out what I wanted or how to explain what I wanted. That sort of intangible thing. And I wish sometimes that I could just put a line on my rubric that said the other stuff, 50 points or whatever it is. But that's not fair to students, and that doesn't do a lot of good for me. So things on here that are interesting to you. Anything that jumps out? I don't know if you can see that small screen. One of the things that many of you mentioned is time. The time that it takes in class to do these kind of assessments. the time that it takes on your part as an instructor to give feedback on them, to even process the information that you get from the assessments. I don't know how many of you have read Lyndon Nelson's book, Teaching at Its Best. I keep checking it out as an ebook from the Albertsons Library on my iPad, so I can only get it for 10 days at a time, so I keep redoing it. But one of the things she talks about in assessment is how often the information we get from assessment comes too late for us to do anything with it to make a difference for our students. And so that's part of the need for constant assessment. And she recommends one thing that I hadn't thought about before, which is writing exam questions right after the class that you talk about that material, so that you remember what you actually talked about in class, or what you can go over. And I think, okay, well, that's enough. Like, instead of waiting till, oh my gosh, I gotta get that exam written. So time, certainly. And I think, in my experience, using digital means of assessment can really help in managing that load, and also in getting that feedback to students in a really timely manner so that they can use it. Grades, translating assessment into grades, since those aren't necessarily the same thing. But if you're measuring how well they learn, do you evaluate, hey, wow, this student really progressed a lot over the course of the semester, that translates into a grade. So I'm going to tell lots of stories, but I have another sister who took a modern dance class in college. And she came to the teacher halfway through the semester and said, I noticed that I have a C right now. What can I do to improve my grade? And the teacher said, you were never going to be a good enough dancer this semester to get an A in this class. And my sister said, well, I've never taken a modern dance class before. I'm doing everything you ask. And the teacher said, but there's a certain level of skill that's required to have an A in this class, and I don't think that you're capable of it. So I usually give that to my students at the beginning of the semester, and I say, what do you think about that? Should I be grading you on your mastery of the material, or should I be grading you on your effort? And we get into usually a pretty good discussion about what they think. Is hard work enough? Is that what I'm assessing, their effort, or do I am assessing what they've learned? And is that learning an absolute, that they have learned X, or that they have come closer to understanding X than they did at the beginning of the semester? So that when we have to translate those grades, that becomes very difficult, I think. And backloading the semester for ourselves so that we are drowning at the end of the semester. And I thought this one was interesting about students regurgitating the lecture. I had an instructor in college who wrote back to me on one of my exams, it's so nice to know that someone was paying attention in class, because the answer that I gave him was basically what he said in class. And he was really happy about that I had given him back what he said. And I thought a lot about that. Do I ask students to do that too? Do I say, I don't want you to tell me back what I told you, but do I create assessments that make that the best possibility, or the only possibility for them? Okay, so I wish I probably could send this all to you. Yeah?
Question, the pejorative use of regurgitate, which I've heard for 30 or 40 years. I get it. On the other hand, how do you learn your ABCs? Certain areas, courses, topics seem absolutely to me to require something like that.
Yeah, certainly. That's a good point. Right, that, if I ask you a question like, who sculpted the statue of David, right? Well, that's a lot of possible answers to that one, I guess. But I don't want them to make up a new answer to that. I don't want them to imagine a possibility of that. But part of that has to do with the question that I'm asking and the level of knowledge. So it has to do with those learning objectives, making sure that our learning objectives are not all on the regurgitating level. Some of them are probably going to be, right? You need to know that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay, see, good case in point. I'm regurgitating what I knew, what I've learned, without necessarily having that higher knowledge that you would hope would go along with it. And so I think it goes back to those learning objectives again, right? Certainly, there's foundational knowledge, but hopefully it leads to that if and when and under what circumstances and what if kind of questions that lead to some kind of thinking on the student's part. Yeah?
Quick question about that, Paul. Actually, can save those results in some fashion if you do it as a teacher?
Yeah, actually, I can have an email to myself and I can post them to the site if you guys would like me to.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it's really interesting to see this and raises a lot of questions for me about my own teaching. Yeah.
And it would be nice with a mobile device for us to be able to see it here, because it's really hard for me to read.
Yeah, and I don't think Socrative has that possibility. especially because students don't have to create an account, which is one of the nice things about using it, but then when the drawbacks. But again, if you in a class, if you wanted to share those things, you could put them up on your Blackboard site or share them with students in some other way. Okay, so we're going to try to just offer you some suggestions, some ideas, some ways of dealing with this kind of stuff visually. We spell it ours.
Yeah, it does it automatically. So, we want to take you back to a slide that you've seen before. Not the exact slide, but the information that was on that slide. So, you remember what we talked about, 5 characteristics of smart devices were the ones that we felt were important differences. And so, we'd like you to take just a minute or two to think about that list that you just created in soccer, the things that are pinching points. And we match those up against what some of these characteristics are, and ask yourself the question, are there ways that this helps, that these features help in those areas? And are there ways that it could actually make it worse? Now, I don't want to go into we don't want to do a deep dive. This kind of needs to be around the periphery of what we're doing for the rest of the day. We want these 2 questions kind of leading in and out of what you do the rest of the day. So let's not do a little deep dive, but what do you think about that right now? Yes?
I would like to add a bullet point to that assessment with the smart device, availability of the device. Because I have students who have like an old flip phone, and I wouldn't know how I would use a clicker app with that.
Well, I think that we would probably say that doesn't meet the definition of a smartphone. A flip phone doesn't.
Yeah, but if I want to use it in my class, if I want to use mobile technology in my class, I fundamentally assume that all my students have a minimum base level of using apps and or any smart capability.
Right.
What if they don't?
Good question. That's something that you would need to be able to handle if you decide to open this up for an opportunity for your students. What are you going to do if all of them don't have the necessary equipment to be able to do that? What else are you thinking? Yes?
I would build on your comment in terms of answering that question, what would that mean for assessment? Is if you have students with different access to smart devices and different level of familiarity and comfort with them, that's going to potentially, I would think, really affect the products that they create or the activities that they're involved in. I mean, as I'm starting to work on this, I'm like, I don't know how to send email. Things that I'm perfectly capable of doing, suddenly I can't do.
Right.
And so if we're assessing them on that would be a problem. On the plus side, I would say I have that same borderline almost hatred of rating at this point. And I put it off, and it means that, right, the timeliness is a real factor. I'm really thinking about some of the apps allowing you to do audio responses, those types of things, which would make you faster and happier, et cetera. That would be that.
All right. Yes.
Well, just as an anecdote from my own experience, at the beginning of every semester for my History 100 class, I have my students answer several questions. What is history? What do historians do? What sources do they use to do that? And a couple of other questions, and I have them do that at the end of the semester as well to see what they've learned, because it's a foundational course in history to the discipline.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think that having this type of device, or maybe even just laptops or something, is that I could actually have that information and be able to share it with the students better, because right now it's just done in handwriting, and I read them, and I'm the only one with that information. And so I think it might actually be really good for students to see what other students are saying and think about the discipline both before they get into the class and after.
Yeah, very good. Anything else? Okay, well, let's keep that in mind as we go through the remainder of the day, and maybe we'll take this page out of Lisa's notebook and ask you that later in the day to see what else has come up. So for this next activity, what we need you to do first off is get into groups of 8, at least 8. So if there are not 8 people at your table, would you please rearrange yourselves very quickly so that there are at least 8 at your
We
table.
need one person.
Okay, so how are we doing? Is anyone like? How many are you like? You need 2 more over there? We have 2 more individuals? Or
They need one or we should split up the table. They need at least 8.
At least 8. But if we can't get 8, then somebody at the table is going to double up.
And
If you guys are worried about having to double up too much, you can spread yourselves out.
that's okay. We want to keep it.
These 4 want to go to another table so that you're not doubling
How
up.
many more are you join over here?
At least 8.
At least 8. That's what. At least 8. So you can
Yeah,
go to the
there can
table.
be more than 8. So you 4 might want to get to another table so that you're not doubling up, and then you can actually work with someone else on the assignment.
They need one here. There's at least 1, maybe 2 over here. You got your choice.
Okay.
The alternative is still assessments versus.
So what we're going to do is a little bit of group work, and I need to get you
If you like, or you're going over here and it's.
to get you to where you need to be in order to see the materials that you're going to cover. So it's probably real important for you to pay attention at this point. Good. High score. All right. So I need you to go to the schedule for today. So if you can get to the Google site and go to the schedule and go to day 4. As you have done that, raise your hand so I know you know. Okay, if you have raised your hand and you're next to somebody who hasn't raised their hand, your responsibility now is to help that person next to you get there. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and click on the schedule, the plenary session for this morning. The table link is broken.
If you go down to the table of assessment,
Okay, we might need to do a reload. Just fix it. We'll see if there's a problem. Okay, if you are on the plenary session page, raise your hand. Now, a lot of hands are just making full to the big groups. Okay, if you're next to somebody who doesn't have their hand raised, find out where they're at. I'll be the plenary session.
I went home and looked at the file called our.
No teacher left behind.
Some inappropriate girl.
And scroll down, and we're going to go to the table of alternative assessments. Click on it. Once you're there, raise your hand. Look at that. If you're having a problem reloading, you might need to do a reload until it clears your cache, because I had to replace that this morning for some good reasons. All right. Pardon? I could do something. All right, so what we want you to do is split these alternative assessment methods up so that table. If you have a table where there's more than 8, then some of you are going to be able to do group work. I want you to read down through the definition, follow the links over at the side so that you have a good idea of what it is that is involved in doing this kind of an alternative assessment. Once you have done that, then I want you to go around and kind of present what that assessment method is to the rest of the people in the table. Okay? So, as you progress through that exercise, and you've shared that with everyone, then we'll move on to another bit of the conversation which we'll take care of. So we're looking at probably 10 minutes to do this. Starting now, Phil.
He's an entrepreneur.
So let's decide now, we're doing what?
Yeah,
Say what I think of really different way. So, what is that say? The traditional assessment basically responds to your question. So, the traditional about that, especially this contrived thing about, is there a difference between authentic essays that students are often asked? Traditional is not making because I would take that, especially authentic is that way instruction or so maybe that's part of the start. The traditional is to be more teacher centered. So I think I understand. Right, that's what I'm saying. Yes, your responsibility is authentic because there's a lot of students wonder about ability to drive what they want to drive. Oh, this task is so maybe it's just questions and so that they're not aware in terms of assessment the students would probably have to do a wider range of things that are so assessment is that you're not able to take control of the person what has all these answers and students are evaluating widely different projects sometimes when there's areas that you yourself are not experts in so that creates more urgent still institutional, for example, so you don't just write a paper, but you don't write comments before you have a chair and a moderator. So I did still consistency with that. Creating it, but you're has like a flag of
I had capstones and senior projects as well as portfolios. And basically, they didn't actually capstones and senior projects because, I mean, my interpretation of a capstone and a senior project is synthesis, the culmination of the application of and this is all framed in the portfolio, which I guess could be just and so in the field of education, we used portfolios and parts of that. So it's nothing integrity, except where the file the repository now is take that to the next step. And it is that's to the hallmark of the portfolios, selecting students are selecting and so are teachers to put into the portfolio that represents growth and development over time. So masters are necessarily best,
but I think that's interesting.
Understanding, and so that it's inherent, it's in the laws of reflection. Why I'm selecting this, and we are supplying our interests. So this is included for it. The cool thing about electronic ones is that you can now capture, if you're going to be a teacher, you teach, you assess, you put in visual. In terms of, there's an app for an eye touch for what to do, but it depends on what you're
Mine was classroom assessment, and there's a term here, CATS, classroom assessment techniques. So they basically just give different ideas and field testing flag learning assessment guide. It's mostly for STEM courses. So so there are great ideas if you go to that website. Concept and attitude survey. They give different ideas like a minute paper. So there are different lengths of time that some of these CATs would take. Some are really brief, some are very Also, I should know my bias. I teach 45 minutes to so that's the way my brain is. I'm not thinking of that way. So then the other one is the national teaching which looks like so things like direct paraphrasing, so things that can happen really quickly in the class, one sentence summaries, application cards where they have to write down something in their own words. The concept that's been introduced. They also are generating questions, which I always feel a little wary about because, you know, people in the education programs have algebra questions. So asking students in a class on how to write a good question, I feel like is, but the idea is just to kind of so yeah, there are just two different sides here. One more geared toward the sciences and one
So mine was
yeah, it's right. Boom, here's the the driving part as well. Yeah, so you get
The examples, I like
Okay, so that's
test, but I was saying the same as on the driving test.
okay, folks, we're going to have your for just a second. So we've hit different pieces of the table issues, So what I am going to do is I'm going to outline the rest of the exercise, and then you need to police your own pace to get as far through this exercise as you can get in the 20 minutes that we have left in this session. So wherever you are, take a place note, and that's where you're going to start when I get done talking here. So the next thing that we want you to do is to pair up. Two of you. Pair means two. Okay? So pair up with somebody who you haven't talked to at your table, and that might be hard for history folks. Somebody you haven't talked to at your table who doesn't know how you are presently doing assessment. And you tell them about how you're doing assessment, and then you talk about which of these alternative assessments that you've heard about you would like to try, and get some help talking with each other about, bounce those ideas off, what you would like to try and how you think it would go. That's how we'll spend the next 15 minutes, and I'll come around and see where you're at. The last thing we need to do before we can end this session is kind of give you an overview of the rest of the day, and I'd like to have 2 to 5 minutes to be able to do that. So if you've only done 1 or 2 folks on your table, let's get going on this thing and see how far we can get through it in the next 15 minutes. Thank you.
It's not necessarily skill-based, it's just, so it really is what you're pretty much.
The accreditation body mandates so much of what we do in terms of assessment. So we come through, if you're in one of the classes that's called the core, we work with the job. We're on the next thing. Okay, I'll talk to you up there now already. Yeah, up there now. So my name's foundational program. So if you jump around the site, there's a fun it's called the assessment teaching area. And but I just this guy gives a lit search on the subject and the summary sales recommendations, which I found a couple of things fairly striking. One said above average performance of female students on independence, which I thought was right. Exactly. So my own point perspective is right. Well, I mean, it's just the
He's just recording.
There are a couple of decent points that I'd like to point out. First of all, shifts in group size and the level of stabilization. I find that to be horribly true. I teach classes all 75% of the group work. So definitely, once the groups go past about 4, done. It is.
I don't just on this.
Effective use of peer assessment on that, and I'm like, I have the first individual assessment of their contribution to the group, and then I'm moving to the peer evaluation. Typically, I'll try to have 2 each kid in the class, sit down and have them verbally task about what they said, what they said,
So you may share? Yeah.
No. It's confidential with me, but I sit down and I kind of summarize and sometimes there are people that don't have the time or something come up and they don't have it, should have about so when I sit down, I clean the verbiage up, I'm talking about customers, things like that. But, I'm trying to I find that the most effective way to go is kind of value should. But I hate
Click on the things that you think are appropriate, you can attach
Feel free to do
your
it.
sections, and you can make overall comments. They can see exactly how you apply this. I like it. This is the blackboard. No, it's much better. So when you're grading limitations, like you go in with a lot of things and things that require you to but one thing I just like to know about this is when you list it, pull it up, you can have lines from the top of the shiny purple. Yeah, the placard, it's separate.
Could be a little bit of both. I mean, I think you can probably grade the performance of a nice
And then, the only thing where you can do and the students always
folks, let's wind up real quickly so that we can get you off to the break on time. So I wanted to have a few minutes for us to be able to share from table to table, but I don't think we're going to be able to do that in order to keep on schedule. I've got some eager presenters out in the hall that are ready to get up and get going. So why don't we talk a little bit about what the sessions are going to be from this point forward. So we're going to go now to a break, and then at 10:45 we'll start our concurrent sessions. We have a panel that's going to be in this room that is going to be discussing students as peer assessors. We already had a question on that this morning. I think we have a pretty good spread from some different departments of people who are doing that sort of thing. They're going to briefly present a case study of what it is that they're doing, what problem they're trying to solve when they set up their peer assessment situation, and then how they went about doing that. And then once they are all through doing that, we anticipate there will be a discussion where you will have an opportunity to ask questions and hear them talk to each other about the differences and the questions that they have as that comes up. In Simplot C, we have a session about conducting assessments with Blackboard Mobile Learn. Blackboard Mobile Learn has just come out with a new version in the last week that really threw a wrench into this presentation. So if you want to go feel a little bit of fire and angst, you might want to attend that session. And they will also be talking about what they plan to do as an alternative for the problems that has caused until those problems actually get fixed. But it would still be a very valuable session as they're going to talk about some of the principles of doing what's known as traditional assessments, tests, multiple choice tests, etc. on mobile devices. And then we have Kelly Connor, Max Veltman, and Admiral Trooper who are going to be talking about the use of frequent low stakes testing. Now, so far they haven't been doing this on mobile devices, but they're going to talk about the principles and what they get out of it, and we hope that we expect we will drive that conversation at the end of it and talking about how that might work. Better, worse with mobile devices. Then we break for lunch. At 12:45 we'll start concurrent sessions again. Here in Simplot PD we'll have 3 individuals who are going to be showing you how to use clicker response systems, and we're going to specifically be focused on how you can use those that tactic on a mobile device. In Simplot C, we have 2 individuals who have been with you most of the time. And Tana has been here most of the time, even though she wasn't supposed to be a student, but we offered her the opportunity to come as a presenter. And she has taken advantage of that. So we're glad she's been here. And Leslie's been with history folks. They're going to be talking about how they use wikis and discussion boards to accentuate student engagement in their courses. Then we'll have a break at 2:15. At 2:30 there will be concurrent sessions again. The first one will be writing assessment and assessing writing. We have a number of individuals from the English department, some you've already heard from, Jen Black, and one from marketing and finance, Lisa Clean, who will be talking about how they do writing assessments and how they assess student writing. And I'm not sure that many of them are using mobile devices at this point, so that will be, again, a direction that conversation should go as they talk to you about what they feel like the strengths and weaknesses of mobile devices are in that effort. And then we have Simplot C, place-based assessment and assessment in the field by David Rickles and Nicole Maloney, both from the music department. They are both in the music department, but they do very different things with mobile devices when it comes to assessment. David Rickles is actually assessing student teachers that are out in the field. They only get, most places where they place student assessments in music or student teachers in music, there's only one music professor, so there can only, or music teacher, so there can only be one student teacher. And so his task has been to try and form a sense of community among those student teachers as they've been placed in different areas out there in the field. And he's been using mobile devices to accomplish that. Nicole Lundy uses mobile devices for a number of different reasons, but in this case she's going to be talking about the way that she uses it to assess her students as they practice and perform on musical instruments. Any questions about any of those sessions? Okay, the last thing I have to tell you about, I'm over time, I apologize. We spared no expense on those nice platinum styluses that you have. You can tell. If any of them are falling apart, we now have a tube of super glue, and we are happy to make these for you on those styluses if you are having a problem with that. So let's have a break. Thank you.